That's it. The 2021 NFL season is over, and the Super Bowl champions are the LA Rams. For
It's the
Dallas
Rams, dude. It's the
Cowboys, do
Rams.
not say anything yet for Dallas Cowboys Overtime. I am Fort Worth Star-Telegram sports columnist Matt King with a broken heart, and he is Clarence E. Hill Jr. waiting to gloat for no reason other than to make fun of me and mock me, which I have to say I probably earned. So, Clarence, the floor is yours.
No, I have no reason to mock you. I mean, you should root for your home team and your childhood team.
Yep.
But it's not about superstitions. It's not about the jersey you wore, the hat you wore. Then, just like now, you lost to the better team.
Yep, that's exactly right.
The 49ers were the better team back then.
Yeah,
the Rams were the better team on Sunday, and they were the better team before the game. You guys kept it close. The Bengals kept it close, certainly, but we knew all along that they had no chance against that pass rush.
No, they didn't. That's ultimately what got them. The Bengals gave up 7 sacks in the last quarter and a half, and really it was a miracle that they were even in the game, and they should have won it. They could have won it, even though the Rams were the better team. There's a lot of games in an NFL season where the inferior team wins because the margin is just so close.
No, there's no question.
And that's why the Bengals got to the Super Bowl in the first place. They won those close games and got to another close game, and they couldn't win it. The Rams were a better team throughout the regular season and certainly in the playoffs. And they were built for that game. They went all in to win that game, and they did it. But it is, Clarence, I tweeted this. I hadn't been invested in a game like that in a long, long time, in any game, as a fan. And I can't even remember the last time I cared like that. I know how much you love UT, how much you bleed orange. When was the last time you really cared about a game and the outcome was a loss, your team lost, and it really bothered you, like after the game and even into the next day? Can you remember?
I got PTSD. There's so many UT games that have been heartbreaking over the last 2 years, starting with, last year's Red River shootout, but, certainly years prior, the KU game, not this past year, the one on the Charlie Strong. I mean, there's some game, but yeah, I got PTSD or UTSD, or however you want to call it.
UTSD.
I stole that from Otto. He gave that to me. UTSD.
That's a good one.
But I mean, you should be invested if you're a fan. And my thing is that, like, I don't really have a pro team, so all of my energies, my fandom, go into Texas sports, because that's where my fandom is, because I don't have a basketball team or football. I don't really have it. I like players. I watch games. I enjoy sports. I don't really have a pro team that I'm invested in like that. And so, it's all in. I understand how it feels. It's like a gut punch.
Yeah, it was. That's exactly. And the odd part is I just forgot about it. I forgot about caring that much about something you have absolutely no control over, and really it has nothing to do with you at all. But caring that much, like I was 12 again, I was 13 again, and when they started that drive, when the Rams started that drive, I was like, oh God, this is going to happen again. And sure enough, and the difference is, unlike the last time the Bengals were in the Super Bowl, when they gave up the long drive to the 49ers, this time they got the ball back and they had a shot. Of course, they were going against Aaron Donald and that defensive line that just completely overpowered them in that second half, and ultimately was the difference in the game and the reason why the LA Rams are Super Bowl champions. And which leads us into our first topic here today. As the Dallas Cowboys now are officially in the offseason and everybody is at 0-0 again, is there any chance that the Cowboys would look at what the Rams did? Because if we know anybody who would do it, it would be Jerry, and make big, giant, sacrificing moves to take on stars the way the Rams did. They traded for Matt Stafford. They traded for Jalen Ramsey. They signed Odell Beckham Jr. They traded for Von Miller. And all of those guys were a big reason why they won this Super Bowl. Those were things that we had not seen in an NFL team. I don't know if we've ever seen it on that scale before. We've seen it in baseball. We've certainly seen it in basketball and the NBA. I don't know if we've really seen that in the NFL. Could you see the Cowboys under Jerry giving that sort of method a shot?
I could see the Cowboys under Jerry if Steven wasn't attached to his hip. And it's really about Steven who sets the financial plan for the Cowboys and how to go about building their team. And Steven does not like to sign big money free agents. He thinks the guys who have to leave other teams are leaving because they got problems. He certainly prefers to build through the draft. Certainly the Rams are opposite. They value proven experience over risky draft choices, and draft choices can be risky. And certainly they were all in. The thing that the Cowboys did, they just found a happy medium because, one reason why Dak's career has taken a jump is because they did go in and trade for Amari Cooper. You do need to bring in stars and big time players to supplement what you do in the draft. Certainly drafting well and picking well has made the Cowboys contenders, kept them contenders, and is why you're at this point, because you did draft Zeke and CD and that offensive line and Tank Lawrence and certainly Micah Parsons and so the draft is your foundation. It should be your foundation. Keep in mind, as we talk about all the free agents that Rams picked, and picked up, and the guys they brought, it was Aaron Donald, a draft pick, Cooper Kupp, a draft pick. Yep. They brought that thing home. So you have to do both, but you cannot ignore making bold moves in free agency. And the Cowboys need to be more bold, whether it's free agency or the trade deadline, to get the team over the hump.
Do you think, I totally agree with everything you said, especially about Stephen Jones. He's on the record about it. If you go into free agency, that means you've made a big mistake someplace along the draft and that you have to overspend, and that's going to screw up your cap situation, et cetera, et cetera. But you also brought up Amari Cooper. Now, Amari Cooper was a little bit younger, so that made that giving up that first-round pick to the Raiders to get him a little bit more appealing, that you were going to get a younger player who was on his first NFL contract, where some of the other guys, Beckham, Von Miller, they were a little bit older. Obviously, it worked. Do you see Steven potentially? I don't think they would ever go do a Roy Williams type trade again. Do you? Or no. Joey Galloway, or even a Deion Sanders.
It depends on the team needs, and certainly, when they went and did Amari Cooper, they had no receivers. It was a glaring need.
Yeah.
And it certainly depends on what you need. And as you look at this Cowboys team, I mean, they still need help up front. They still need help on the defensive front, and possibly they could use, some help in the secondary. But the thing about it is, it's not necessarily doing a Roy Williams type trade. It's like in the middle of the season, like the Rams did not settle. Even they made all these moves in the offseason. But in the middle of the season, they still made two more moves. They added Odell and they added Von Miller in the middle of the season.
Yeah.
They were already all in the offseason when they traded, heaven and earth for Matt Stafford. And they don't really have any draft picks. They don't have a first round pick through 2024.
Yeah, that's the crazy part. Is I don't know how what that team does. Do they just embrace like the NBA way and just?
I don't know what they do, but the one is, what they got? They got a title.
It all matters. And if you get a title,
keep building and say we want to keep these picks and keep building, but you build into what? What have you built in 26 years?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Rams have been to the Super Bowl twice in the last 3 years. They've won 2 titles since 1999. What have you built? Doing it the slow, methodical, safe way, conservative way.
I think they follow the same or similar pattern as just about every other team.
Stadium, yeah, that's what you built.
And yeah, you built AT&T Stadium. But I think what the Cowboys did was to do what most teams do. And the truth of the matter is, the Rams were pretty close to losing that game.
Oh, of course.
And
there's no guarantees in anything. They were
right.
Listen, they were close to losing the championship game. I mean, to the 49ers,
sure.
You don't get dropped the interception.
Yep.
But there's no.
But they won. So who cares? It doesn't matter. They won.
Yeah, right. The victors get to write the story.
Yep.
That's just won. It. When you win, you get to write the story, even though they're counting, they could have lost.
Yep. And so they did it. No different than when Tampa Bay went out and traded for John Gruden. He walks in the door a number of years ago and replacing Tony Dungy. They win the Super Bowl. So it was worth it. So if you make all those moves and you win the Super Bowl, then everything that you did was worth it. And you don't worry about it until tomorrow and all of these other problems that come now, whether it's Aaron Donald potentially retiring. He's talked about it. I don't think he will. Sean McVay walking out the door. Pardon?
McVay is talking about retiring.
Yeah, Sean, I think that's just a money play, but good for him. But they're going to have real issues, and they'll worry about that. The bottom line is that whole team, management, ownership, they want a Super Bowl. And so that they have that, and the Cowboys don't. As we look ahead now at the NFL draft, the combine is a couple of weeks away in Indianapolis. Free agency is obviously a big deal, and the big concerns for the Cowboys entering this offseason is what are they going to do with Tank Lawrence? He's under contract at a huge number. Amari Cooper, he's under contract at a big number. And then Jaron Kearse, who was, I would say, their biggest surprise. He's going to be a free agent. He was their big offseason get, who we didn't think he was going to be an offseason get, but he's had a great year for the Cowboys at a position that they had not had a lot of production from a long time. Clarence, and I didn't even mention Randy Gregory, who's a free agent as well. Clarence, Dalton Schultz. There's a number of other guys. I was just thinking of sort of the high-profile guys. Do you think Tank Lawrence is going to be back, and do you think Amari Cooper will be back?
Yeah, those are the key decisions the Cowboys have to make between now and March, and as they, before you even get to free agency, they got to decide what they're going to do with Tank Lawrence and what they're going to do with Amari Cooper because of their numbers, their contract numbers. And we love Tank Lawrence as a football player, what he does, but he hasn't had double-digit sacks, since he signed the big contract. You pay him $20 million for 6 or 7 sacks and be a run stopper, and you still got to try to pay Randy Gregory. Is the defensive line though better without Tank Lawrence? No. Who do you have to replace him with to do what he does? Nobody. But he hasn't played a full season,
right?
And has not been as productive. And so those are things that need to be addressed. The hope would be that you could get him to take a pay cut. You talk to him in a pay. I don't know if he would, but I know he's not getting $20 million on the street.
No, and I think that's going to be his issue. Is like, is he going to get if the Cowboys cut him? Would he get more signing as a free agent than staying here and taking a pay cut?
Yeah, I don't know that. It depends on what the cut is too. And certainly you cut him and give him a chance to make some of his money back through incentives or whatever else. But I certainly know he's not getting the contract as is on the street. So that's one thing the Cowboys have in their pocket. But on the flip side, we're just talking about Amari Cooper. This team is not better without Amari Cooper.
There's no doubt about it. This is one that Clarence. Is it legitimate? Because I know it started in the offset, like before the offset, like right away. The Cowboys hadn't lost but 5 minutes after the game against San Francisco, and people are throwing out, are they going to cut Amari Cooper? I'm like, you got to be crazy. They can't cut him.
Well, it was the nature of the contract and how it was built.
Right.
And,
I get that.
The guaranteed money is gone. So if you're going to walk away, you can walk away now. $20 million is a lot for a receiver. And it's definitely a lot for a receiver that you're not using and getting the ball to, who's not maximizing his potential. And if you're making CD the number one receiver and you're giving Dalton Schultz more opportunities than Amari Cooper, and why are you paying him $20 million?
I don't know.
So it's really not necessarily Cooper's fault, but the reality is Jerry Jones invested this much into this receiver, and he's getting this in return. Okay, so the question is, are we going to maximize our money and our investment? And if we're not going to do that, then why should I pay that? But the bottom line is you can tie Dak's career trajectory from where he was in 2018 to where he is now, getting that big contract, to the acquisition of Amari Cooper. You look at his numbers and look where he was and where he is now. It is a direct correlation to them bringing in Amari Cooper.
No doubt, and I just my own 2 cents on Amari Cooper is that you have a wide receiver who could age well. Now, he's not Larry Fitzgerald, but he has similar abilities to Larry Fitzgerald, who played a long time with the Arizona Cardinals because he's a brilliant route runner, and Amari Cooper is a great route runner.
Right.
He's not as good as Jamar Chase. He doesn't have that kind of ability. There's some other guys, but as a guy who could age really well at that spot, I don't see how you can do this right now with Amari Cooper. Now, it'd be one thing if he was missing game after game. The guy's a pro. He's played through stuff. I think this is one guy. The Tank thing makes sense. You've got to cut him, or I shouldn't say have to cut him. You've got to figure that out. You can't have him at that number, at $20 million for that productivity, but you still want him around. Cooper, just like this isn't even a discussion. You got to
right. It shouldn't be, especially with the fact that you had thought that maybe Michael Gallup would take a big jump.
I mean, but he got hurt.
Michael Gallup is torn ACL.
Yep, and he was hurt before that.
Right.
So he wasn't able to do anything really and take some of that or, I don't want to say take some of that pressure off those two guys because there really isn't that much. It's spread around, but you thought he could have done something. But if you're hurt, you can't do anything. Two other guys, real quick, before we move on to the final topic here on Cowboys Overtime. What happens to J-Ron Curse and Randy Gregory?
Well, I think that, both of those guys will look at this situation and say, this is the best place for me. Best place. J-Ron Curse was a journeyman until he came to Dallas. He was not a regular starter. The fact, especially the fact that Dan Quinn is back and the way Dan Quinn uses him, he's a free agent, and same with Randy Gregory, and it's their right to try to maximize their earning potential because you only get a few bites at the apple, and you want to sort of maximize your earning potential. But if you go to a situation that don't use you the way that Dan Quinn uses you, it's not going to work out. So I think that they would want to stay, and certainly they would maybe take a team-friendly discount to a certain extent to stay. I know Randy Gregory would, because it's not just about the money. It's also about, his situation and what he's gone through and the way the Cowboys have committed to him and stood by him throughout all these years and what he's gone through and being comfortable and finally get his life right. You don't want to uproot that and start having problems again. So the Cowboys can certainly count on Randy Gregory, wanting to be here and being team friendly, but they can't be cheap with either one of them. You still have to give a quality offer, because again, this guy worked at Amazon warehouse a couple years ago. Okay. This is his last chance to really make life-changing money for him and his family and his kids.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to add about J-Ron Curse, and I think it's applicable here because you hit the nail on the head. Before he came here, he was kind of a journeyman. And the last time I can really think that the Cowboys did that, I remember when they saw Gerald Sensabaugh, and he was a serviceable player. He wasn't as good as what J-Ron did this season. But a guy that I recall like this, when the Cowboys signed Ken Hamlin, and they brought him off the street from Seattle, he's a nice player. And then that first year under Wade Phillips, he had a fantastic year. He's a Pro Bowler. He's everywhere. He's really good. They give him all kinds of money. He's not the same guy again, and they cut him 2 years later. Any chance at all with J-Ron that we're looking at Ken Hamlin 2.0, just a guy who's a flash in the pan, one-hit wonder, and next season he'll just be another guy?
Or it could be Laurent Robinson, guy, receiver.
For sure.
Big year on the Romo, signs as a free agent, makes big money, and we never hear from him again. He's never that player again. I mean, it happens. I've seen guys fall off a cliff, but that's the gamble you make. But you got to trust that how they're using him and certainly in this defense and with the defense coordinator that you can get more. He's He's younger than Ken Hamlin was at that time.
I think. Wouldn't you agree? He's probably a little. I'm sorry. Wouldn't you agree? J-Ron is probably a little bit better than Ken Hamlin at that point.
No, Ken Hamlin was a top player when he in Seattle and coming out of Arkansas. He was one of maybe a first or second round pick. He was a top pick.
He was a second round pick. Yeah.
So I don't know that. I just know that he's younger, still a developing player that you can believe in.
Last subject I want to talk about here is more of an NFL-wide issue, and to me, quite frankly, a sports issue, a pro sports issue in general. NFL is currently being sued by former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, who in his lawsuit alleged that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross offered him $100,000 to lose games. That's $100,000 to lose, not just games, but any game that they lost. He offered him $100,000. That's what he alleged in the lawsuit. Now, and the contention was that Stephen Ross was trying to lose games in order to secure a higher draft pick, something that has been going on forever in pro sports as teams lose to try to get better through the draft. I don't think that's that big of a deal. Now, certainly a lot of people disagree with me about it. Clarence, to me, the bigger issue about this lawsuit is not the fact that a team owner said, hey, lose some games. They've been trying to do that forever. The bigger issue in this lawsuit, of course, is that the NFL only has 2 black head coaches right now. If you want to say 2.5, that's fine. Mike McDaniel is biracial, but let's be honest with ourselves. Lovie Smith and Mike Tomlin are the only black head coaches, and that's why Brian Flores filed this lawsuit. Clarence, where do you stand on this? Not on the subject of the ridiculously low numbers of black coaches as head coaches in the NFL, but this idea that what Stephen Ross allegedly told Brian Flores to lose games deliberately is that big of a deal. I don't think it is, because teams have been doing that for forever to get a higher pick. What do you think?
Well, I mean, certainly the issue of minority coaches and minority hiring of black coaches, the lack of black coaches in the league, the 70% black, that's the major issue. That's the big deal. Within the lawsuit, though, it may be harder to prove that than prove this. And so I think they're trying to kill two birds with one stone to a certain extent, but they're trying to, trying to get them for something and trying to get everybody on the record and get these things for something. The issue of tanking is an integrity issue that the NFL has to take seriously. Whether we did it with a wink, nod, it's something that you have to take seriously. And if you got it, and he got proof of that, then it may cause them to remove Ross as an owner. And so those are things they have to take seriously.
You mentioned, though, integrity. Hang on. You mentioned integrity. And I understand that point, because now with the NFL having an open relationship with gambling, that's tricky area. For the longest time, that relationship was in the closet, but now it's open. They're completely, they're making money from it. That's fine. My point is, and Mark Cuban got in trouble 4 years ago when he went on a podcast with Dr. J and said, we told the guys it's better if we lose games. They were basically spent a year and a half trying to lose games to get a higher draft pick, right? Mid-'80s, we saw with teams trying to get Patrick Ewing. It's gone on all the time. Indianapolis Colts suck for luck, right? Because they had lost Peyton Manning. My issue about integrity is that if the coach is trying to win the game and the player is trying to win the game, then there's not really an issue. If the management gives them a team so bad, there's nothing. That's a deliberate strategy to improve your team over the long haul. And to me, I'm like, well, how are you supposed to what are you supposed to do that? Are you supposed to legislate that out? You can't. First of all, Brian Flores.
The problem is when you're paying for losses.
That's ridiculous.
Obviously, that's the problem. You're paying for losses. And everybody says, end of the season, don't win games, improve your draft choices, wink, nod. That's what it is. And to bring this point home, I mean, if they would have lost more games, they would have had Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, wouldn't they? I mean, that was the same draft we're talking about. So you can't pay for losses. That's where they can't get in that business where you're paying. If we are on the same page mentally in doing this, that's one thing. As the coach were when they were doing suck for luck, but when you're actually paying for losses and you got a paper trail, that gets you. That's federal. Those are crimes. You can't do that. And so that's why we have to take that seriously. But again, the bigger issue remains there as we continue to get off tangent is how do you legislate anti-racism in the league with among others? How do you legislate people giving guys opportunities to coach? Guys who, listen, I love, like the Bengals coach, love him, love what he's done. But he was the assistant receivers coach 4 years ago with the Rams. The assistant receivers coach, with the Rams. Yeah. And then he becomes the head coach. There are guys who've been receivers coaches for 100 years who don't get those opportunities.
Oh, what about Leslie Frazier?
Yeah, all of that. I mean, so, some guys, we see the upside based on what? Like Joe Judge. He's a special team, unknown special team coach.
Oh, because Belichick
but no one ever sees the upside in black coaches and give them opportunities out of the blue. And they have to have a perfect resume. They have to have everything. Everything has to be dotted correctly for them to even get an interview, and they still don't get the job. That's the problem.
They'll get the token interview. I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble, and I think the real problem, Clarence, because you're right. I think Roger Goodell, especially considering who his dad was, the late senator who once walked with Martin Luther King's daughter protesting the Vietnam War. Roger Goodell is aware of his legacy, and Roger Goodell does not want this on his resume, but he can't make an owner hire anybody. You can't. There's a lot of things as a league that you can force down a franchisee's throat in terms of you have to do this, this, and this, but you can't legislate any kind of rule that says you have to hire a black head coach. You can't do that. And my contention, as horrible as this sounds, I think one of the biggest problems that these coaches run into when they go through the interview process is that you've got these older white owners look across from them and say, yeah, something's wrong. I don't know. And I think it's because the black coach doesn't sound white enough. And I know that sounds horrible, but I'm like, I can't think of any other reason why some of these guys, you mentioned the Zach Taylor thing. I remember when they hired him, I'm like, the guy's 8 years old. Or some of these other guys. I still remember Adam Gase when he was hired by the Jets. I couldn't think of a worse guy to be the head coach of the New York Jets. He got the job. And I look at these candidates sometimes like Frazier. How long did Marvin Lewis have to wait before he got a shot? And he was with the Bengals forever, and he did a nice job. And there's a ton of guys, the Bieniemys of the world. I don't know what you're supposed to do about that. And to me, in my mind, the NFL saying we're investigating these claims against Stephen Ross by Brian Flores. That's fine. You have to do what you want. You have to do, and you're right. As an owner, you can't espouse one of your owners saying, "Here's $100,000. Go lose this game." You can't do that. You can't do that. And Flores was right to reject it. But the bigger issue to me is not that. I don't question the integrity of the NFL game. I do question whether or not these 32 owners, I shouldn't say all of them, because some of them aren't the same, whether or not they can look across the table at the guy who doesn't look like them and say, you're hired. Yeah, because there's no evidence that says they will.
And to me, that's the bigger problem, and the notion that you need black ownership to hire black coaches.
Yep.
To me, that's not the answer, because the answer should be whether it's a black owner or white owner, you hire the best guy for the job.
And can you think of a sport?
And so
think about all of these guys, Clarence, who get second, third, and fourth chances because they can play. Why? Because that's what the NFL is, right? And yet you got all these guys who are good dudes who are probably be just as good or bad as any of these other white counterparts. They can't get a job.
No, you can't. I mean, it's a shame. But it is a problem, and as great as that halftime show was for me, it doesn't solve the problem of racism in the NFL.
No, and on this one, I got to tell you, I don't know how you fix it, because I do believe Goodell's a commissioner. He doesn't run the league. It's silly. He tries to get a majority amongst 32 owners who are big ego guys and got a lot of money. I think he's trying to do the right thing, Clarence. I just don't know how you force this one down their throat, because clearly actions speak louder than words, and a logo that says end racism in an NFL stadium. Yeah, I don't think that really cut it. Maybe that's just me. Anyways, this is good conversation. Clarence, I appreciate it. For all of your Dallas Cowboys needs about offseason, the draft, and free agency, be sure to check us out on StarTelegram.com. He's Clarence E. Hill Jr. I'm Mac Engel, and I don't want to talk about the Super Bowl.